Hello and welcome to the 2021 pre-season update for Condong Sugar Mill. I'm Phil Scribb, the Operations Manager at Condong Sugar Mill. Today I'll be running through the review of the 2020 season, then do an overview of the 2021 season, then run through some of the highlights of the factory maintenance and capital expenditure program that's been undertaken in the last year. After that, Johan will run through the cane supply aspects of things, including harvesting allocation, bin allocations, an update on where we're at with the quad trailers, and a reminder about the bin weight incentive scheme that's in play this season. Following that, Malcolm Warren will talk about. Firstly, I'd like to start with a review of the 2020 season. The season started on the 9th of June. The season went a bit longer than we first anticipated due to a higher level of inside and outside stoppages. There was over 1,000 hours of stoppages there. That ended up pushing our finish date out to the 1st of December, and the overall season length ended up at 25 weeks. The crop crushed was just a little lower than we had forecasted at 519,528 tonnes, but not a bad crop given everything that went into it. CCS was 11.61 average for the season. We made 58,300 tonnes of raw sugar. Onto the 2021 season. The grower estimate came in at 450,000 tonnes. This was thought to be a little bit light, and after discussions with the CSMC and looking at the average grower estimates over the last 5 years, which are tending to run 7 or 8% lower than actual, it was agreed with the CSMC to raise the crop estimate for this season to 480,000 tonnes. So based on 480,000 tonnes, it was agreed start date of the 21st of June. We'll be starting a little earlier this year at 8 AM rather than 10 AM. Kicked off a bit quicker there. Of course, we've had an extra. Moving on to the maintenance overview. The maintenance for the year ending June 2021, which we're just about to end now, we had a budget of just under $3 million at $2,925,000. This was some $400,000 more than we had in the previous year. So we managed to get a few more items done. The big items that we undertook was a major overhaul of the injection water pump. The injection water pump is the pump we use to pump cooling water out of the river to supply all our condensers to run the pans and the evaporators. So we needed some major repairs there. We actually found the shaft in that pump broken at the end of the season, so there's a new shaft. Capital expenditure, we've had a bit of capital spent this year. We got capital to replace our air compressor. We have 2 air compressors. They're both in pretty poor state of repair. One had major issues and the other one has ongoing issues, so we're replacing the one that has major issues with a new compressor. Should give us compressed air supply security for some years to come. The front end loader we have, which we use to lift sugar off the sugar floor to reclaim it back into the bins, into the system, and we also use it for loading ash into trucks out of the boiler station.
Good day, this is Johan, Condong Cane Supply Manager. I'll take you through a couple of slides, predominantly to do with harvesting and transport. First slide will cover harvesting allocation, a bit of an update on bin distribution, moving on to transport, and then a brief update on the 2021 quad build, an update of the bin incentive scheme and the changes, and then finally a quick discussion on pads. Total grower estimate came to 450,000 tonnes. That is down on last year's 519 actuals. The grower estimate to actual performance average for the last 5 years is around 8%, and considering that, a forecast of 480 has been accepted and used for budget purposes. The harvesting group with the biggest quota will be Tweed Valley Harvesting, with a maximum of 33 bins at 25 tonnes or 28 bins on 27 tonnes. They also will be the group cutting the most hectares per day at 7.2. Total of 42 hectares is to be cut per day to service the mill's throughput of 4,320 tonnes. There will be 8 harvesters, including cattle, operating on early and a late roster. This will be again on extended hours as per previous recommendation of the Continuous Improvement Group that was accepted by the Cane Supply Management Committee. 7.2 bins will be required to maintain crush rate at 180 tonne an hour at 25 tonne bin weights, and 6.6 bins to maintain 180 at 27 tonnes. Groups will be operating 5 20% rounds. Just a reminder for late harvesters, they should plan their start time to avoid waiting for bins, and then also bin placements needs to be considered to minimize avoidable movements. There will be a bin weight incentive for this year, and it is tonnes based instead of per bin. FEDC will be cutting both Condong and Broadwater with one harvester this year. This will see a fluctuation of groups quotas of up to 3 bins as they go in and out of each mill area. On to the next slide, bin distribution. The current fleet of aluminium bins is only enough to service the whole business should we maintain an average bin weight of 27 tonnes. With the implementation of the new quad system, it is understood that it will take time and a great effort from all sectors involved to achieve an average bin weight of 25 tonnes and above. With this in mind, bins have been distributed across the business at an average of 25 tonnes. This will require the use of steel bins at Harwood and will be operated with triaxle trucks. The aim is to reduce the steel bins in use during the season as the bin weight average improve. For the start of season, Condong will be allocated with 90 aluminium bins. This would have 44 steel bins in use at Harwood. Once all the quad trailers have been delivered and we can maintain an average bin weight of 25 tonnes and greater, it can be considered to reduce Harwood steel bins to 22. This would have Condong reduced by 2 aluminium bins and would have a total of 88. The mesh bins have been allocated on the final scenario, considering an average of 27 tons. This would have 23 allocated to Condong equitably. Currently there's 18 mesh bins already completed, and the remainder will be done before the start of the season. On to the next slide, transport. Condong Mill will be allocated with 6 quad-axle Mercedes-Benz prime movers and 1 triaxle spare as a backup. The spare triaxle truck would be available from 19th of July, when the last quads are delivered. The spare would function only as a backup truck, being different configuration, which would need a harvesting group to reduce bin weights to be collected legally. Maintenance is targeting to have 90 bins ready for startup. Of these, 23 would have mesh installed, as previously mentioned. Truck drivers would operate 12-hour shifts and will change over from 3 o'clock in the morning and afternoon. Clean pads are required for bin placements. Please report any issues. Also ensure visibility for truck drivers on your farm exits, and if those are on council land, please let us know and report that to council. We operated a full complement of maintained Mercedes-Benz prime movers for the 2020 season, and they certainly delivered good outcomes and savings. The next couple of slides is an update on the 2021 quad trailer build. With quads implemented at Condong for 2020 season, work continued to gain access permits at PBS QML 4, operating at 50.5 tonnes across the whole business. All access permits was in place around December 2020, the final one being Richmond. Trial work was done at Broadwater and Harwood on quads as permits came through late in the year. This allowed the business to progress with replacing the remaining aging trailer fleet. A further 19 quads were ordered and would make up a total of 26 quads for the 21 season. The balance of 5 Mercedes-Benz prime movers will be utilised as triaxles, some on steel bins at Harwood, and later as backup trucks as bin weights improve. This would maintain stock bins as we work our way up toward 25 tonne and above. As previously mentioned, eventually with all quads delivered and mills averaging greater than 25 tonne bin weights, the business would look at reducing the amount of steel bins at Harwood and utilise only 2 triaxle trucks. That would have 3 spare triaxle trucks across the business, 1 for each site. Just an update on the tipping angles of the trailer on the new quad. There's been a fair bit of work done to improve the tipping angle, and this is mostly to address the issues with cane left in the bin on tear off. The main goal was to achieve maximum tipping angle. Hydraulic hoses were altered around the scissor frame to reduce kinking. The entry point have been slightly altered in relation to the scissor frame as seen on the top left photo. The mill tipping bar has been lowered by 230 millimeters. This increases the tipping angle by 3 degrees. The modifications will ensure maximum lift out of the trailer. These improvements to truck and tipping bar should have less cane caught up in the bin when tipping. This is particularly an issue with green cane. Further, the movable bin stop lock pin safety mechanism is now fully automated, as seen in the top photo. Issues around cracking has been addressed with gussets installed where needed on cross members. Increased air capacity on the trailer with additional air tank fitted. Also, larger air lines have been fitted on main lines. The improved air system improves inflation of the airbags and the operation of the movable bin stops. The onboard mass system has been altered to have total prime mover weight instead of steer and drive separate. This optimizes the steer weight capacity around the turntable positioning. The added air will also make the weighing system more reliable. All the improvements on the 21 build were applied to the 2020 built trailers. The next slide will cover changes to the bin weight incentive. The incentive won't be tied to the minimum billet length criteria, as was the case for 2020 season. To attract the bonus incentive, a harvester must be optimized with a 4-blade EHS or manufacturer's optimized 4-blade equivalent. Bonus and penalty will be determined as per the terms and conditions of supply and processing of cane. The maximum bin load limit will be advised to harvesting contractors. Bins for the day will be categorized as follows. For a bonus bin, all bins with weights between the advised maximum legal bin weight and 6% or less below the advised maximum legal bin weight. A penalty is for all bins with weights 16% or more below the advised maximum legal bin weight. Both bonus and penalty would attract a 30 cent per tonne. Bin weights as determined by the mill weighbridge shall be used. Bonuses will be paid monthly and penalties deducted from appropriate harvesting contractors. The maximum bin weight is set at 28.15 tonnes. Penalty would apply on tonnages for bins less than 23.6 tonnes. Bonus would apply on tonnages for bins greater than 26.5 tonnes. Anything in between 23.6 and 26.5 would be considered neutral and won't attract any bonus or penalty. On to the last slide, cane pads. Just a reminder to keep pads clean between rounds. It is required for safe operation. Also ensure to do pad risk assessments for any farm activities in between harvesting rounds. Ensure contractors are doing pad risk assessments when operating on your pad. The pad is deemed a common workplace of the sugar mill under work cover whilst in operation. Pads and roads held up good for the 2020 season. We've got 16,000 allocated for maintenance, which will be directed mostly to the longer multi-lift roads and a few fan pads with issues. Please ensure trees are trimmed around multi-lift road entrances that is on your property, as mentioned before. Notify the mill of any issues with pads and multi-lift roads that may affect safe operation. Thank you for listening. That covers everything I had.
Good day, everyone. Once again, we have been limited in our ability to get out and have our normal round of shed meetings. So this year we're doing it slightly differently again. We're not having a video presentation. We're just going to have a couple of slides and we'll just talk to those. So in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the outlook for the season. We'll talk about varieties. We'll talk about mill mud and ash plans for the year. I'll give you an update on the water quality project and the RSD survey that Jed has just completed. And we'll talk a little bit about acid sulfate soil management and then a few other favorite topics of mine. Anyway, I'll get started and I'll kick off with the seasonal outlook. There's been much debate about this estimate given the season that we've had and the disastrous flooding event that we had in December, although it wasn't a major flood, caused a lot more damage than I've experienced since I've been here anyway. But the cane has never recovered from that, unfortunately, because it got swamped again in February and again in March. So those weak areas have remained weak, and they're going to drag us down, unfortunately. We're hoping for 480,000 tons, and I'm hoping we'll get more than that. And conditions at the moment are great. The cane is continually growing, although not as quickly as it would have in February and March. It is still growing, so those better areas are still adding on some tons. What is of concern will be the CCS at the start of the season, as always, and growers still do have the option of applying ripeners. If you do want to try some ripening, please give me a call and we can arrange something. As I mentioned, conditions at the moment are still good for growing, and predictions are that the winter we are going to experience will be a bit warmer than usual, which will mean that the crop will keep growing if we don't have a frost. Even if we do have a frost, it could be just a cold snap and it can warm up again after that. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen, so time will tell. What is important in terms of CCS is getting your variety choices as optimal as possible at the start of the season. So automatically, your 2-year-old cane would be the ones that you'd kick off with. And if you have to start off with 1-year-old cane, well then Q240 is your variety of choice for early season, followed by KQ and then Q208 as well. Q183, definitely not an early season cane, so avoid that one. But if you have any questions or you do want to discuss an order of harvest, please give me a call and we can look at it in more detail. I'll talk a little bit now about the latest developments in terms of varieties. The Variety Selection Committee met last month and agreed on the release of some varieties. Unfortunately, there are no new releases for Condong. There's one clone that has shown some promise. We have it in the mother plot and the ASP. We have one row of it. And we're going to release that to what we call a limited release. And we'll monitor that with those growers that do want to take some. There won't be enough for everybody, but if we can get 5 or so growers that are prepared to take it and plant it out and keep a close eye on it, we'll give it another year of assessment before we make a decision whether we will release that one or not. But Jed has got more details of that particular clone, and we will talk about it more at the variety walk. In terms of releases for Broadwater and Harwood, SRAW30 and SRA29 have been selected for release at those 2 mill sites. They are what are classified as 2-year-old canes, but the SRA29 has shown some good 1-year-old results. So we will be getting some of that and putting that into the mother plot for further assessment this year and into next year. As far as the variety, the ASP condition, it's looking good. So there should be plenty of seed cane to go around this year. The plant cane is looking better and better, and the ratoon block has really grown exceptionally well. So there's quite a few tons available, and everyone should be able to get what they need. The price for this year has gone back to the 2019 price, and that is $60 per ton for billets collected and 85 per ton for billets delivered. The billet delivery system will be available again this year to those growers on the coast at Crabs Creek and in Mullum. Once again, if you have any questions, queries, please give myself or Jed a call, and we'll try to answer as many of the questions as we can. Thanks. Moving on now to mill mud and ash, just an update on the season plans. Letters detailing the price increase and order forms for the new season will be coming out shortly. Unfortunately, the price has had to be increased to the growers, seeing as there has been a fuel increase as well as a CPI increase over the last year. Once again, the growers are subsidized 50% on the transport cost. There is no cost for the material itself. What you guys pay is purely the cost of the transport. The orders forms will be much the same as previous years, so get them back as correctly filled out as possible, as it works on a first come first served basis. And this year we have to be pretty tight on, if you don't have an order in the system, you cannot expect to phone up and get the contractors just to deliver straight away. You have to get in the line, you have to get an order in the system. So that's the way it's going to work. If you do phone up, you will be asked to fill in an order form. It's not an arduous process and can be done relatively painlessly. The other thing that we'd like you to consider this year is seriously, band spreading is proving to be a really good way of making the mud and the ash go a little bit further. It's cheaper on a per hectare basis because you're not getting as much material. And it also means that more growers can take advantage of the availability of mud and ash. The other thing is we have to keep in mind the EPA limits that have been imposed on us in terms of the volumes applied. In recent seasons, some blokes have been putting on a combination of mud and ash, and broadcasting or broadcast spreading both of those, and resulting in some massive volumes going onto the paddocks. Unfortunately, we cannot continue to do that. So if you do require mud and ash, then it'll have to be banded, and you can get it one banded on top of the other, but at least that way we will still stay within the EPA regulations. If you do have space and you do want to take advantage of the wet dump scenario, and you do want an area designated as a wet dump, please contact me or Chris or Nick or Max, and we have to go out and we have to have a look at the area. We have to make sure that it complies with a few EPA regulations again, and once that has been agreed upon and it is recognized as a wet dump, then the process can continue. But without that verification, unfortunately, you can't just nominate any old place on the farm as a wet dump. That's it as far as mill mud and ash goes. There's nothing much new except the band spreading option, and I think it's something we really need to consider more seriously. Moving on then to water quality, I'll talk a little bit about the end of paddock project, or the project that was initiated by Seb from SRA. He applied and was granted some funds from the government to assess different methods of fertilizer application and the relative losses of nutrients from those two different methods. Some of you might have been involved in that from the outset, but it revolved basically around stool splitting and side dressing separate areas in one block of cane, and then monitoring the runoff from that area to see if there was a difference in the nutrient levels or nutrient losses contained in the water that ran off those areas. Unfortunately, the Condong trial was pretty seriously washed out in that December flood event. So the results from Condong weren't really reliable, and we couldn't use them for much at all. But the trial that was put down at Broadwater and at Highwood were a bit more successful. And in summary, the results that we obtained basically showed that stool splitting resulted in less nutrient loss than side dressing. Having said that, the nutrients that were detected in the runoff water were all at very, very low levels. And it was very hard to then convert those into a loss in terms of kgs per hectare. These trials will be repeated in the coming year, but they're going to be done all in one block at Broadwater, so we can get some duplicated trials and some replicated trials to give us more reliable results. Also, what was done as part of this project was samples were taken from creeks and drains in the surrounding areas adjacent to these trials to try to determine whether there was significant runoff of nutrients and certain herbicides from different areas of the landscape. So we selected areas that had runoff just from grazing areas, runoff from urban areas, runoff from cane areas, and there were quite a mixed bag of results. Nothing was really conclusive in terms of one was worse than the other, because all the nutrients and herbicides that were detected were at very, very low levels. So that project and those samples will be repeated this coming year in an attempt to try and get closer to an idea of what is actually running off. Moving on to RSD, an RSD survey was undertaken this year of commercial blocks to determine what our actual RSD levels are in the respective areas. So a first return block from every single farm number was selected and sampled. So Jed has completed the survey for the Condong area, and Broadwater and Howard are still busy with theirs. The sampling method used was what we call the leaf sheath biopsy method, and we look forward to getting those results and hopefully they'll tell us exactly what the level of RSD is in the district. I'm hoping it won't be too bad. I'm pretty sure it will be there, but the level that we get back will give us an indication of how effective our clean seed program is, and it could show up that yes, we are doing certain things right, but we need to tighten up on other aspects of it. But without those results, we will never know. So I look forward to those results, and as soon as we have them, we'll let you know what they were or what they are. In terms of the normal RSD surveys of seed cane blocks, the nomination forms have been sent out today, and as with the mill mud, please get those completed as soon as you can and get them back to Jed, and that'll enable him to start on his program and let him get on with it and get it finished as soon as possible. So that's all I have on RSD. But once again, if you have any queries or questions, give myself or Jed a call. Okay, this is one that's always with us. It's always going to be around, and it's something that I think sometimes we take for granted or don't pay enough attention to. But acid sulfate soil management is really important for the well-being and for the industry, and we need to take it seriously. In terms of cleaning drains is also vitally important for growing cane on the Tweed. But before you embark on cleaning a drain, please just check with me. You might need a drainage management plan. It's a quick process. It doesn't take long, but get it done, and that way you're covered if somebody does happen to want to see one, or question what you're doing or why you're doing it. It's just a safeguard, and it looks after you and the industry as a whole. In terms of the compliance records, these are a record of all the drain work in terms of digging, drainage, spraying, everything that you've done to drains in the past year. It's a compulsory requirement of the deal or the exemption that we have with the EPA, and it's something that has to be done. It doesn't take a long time. Those records will be sent out shortly, and please, guys, I ask you just if you can take the 10 minutes or so that is required to complete those records. Following on from that, the annual acid sulfate soil management audit will take place in July as normal. 10 growers will be audited, and one of the requirements of that audit is that compliance record to be completed. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to have that record in your files to be able to be produced if needed. Lastly, then, I'd like to cover off on a few matters that are pretty close to my heart. I mention them every year. You're most probably tired of them by now, but I'll go through them again just as a reminder for those of you who might have forgotten. Soil sampling is the first up. It's a really good thing to do if you don't have an idea of what is in your soils and what fertilizer to put on. The easiest way to do it is take a sample. That'll tell you what is in your soil, and then we can give you a recommendation to make up the difference. In that way, you get the most out of the soil, and you give your cane the best chance of doing really well. Once again, these samples are subsidized by the company, so you only pay 50% of the fee, and it's an exercise that is well worth it. So if you want some soil sampling done, in the past I have been able to do quite a few of the samples myself. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to do that this year, as and when you want. So give me enough warning, and there'll be a better chance of me being able to help you out. But even better still, if you take the sample yourself, we have augers here at the office, and you're welcome to borrow those. It literally does not take more than half an hour to do 1 or 2 samples in 1 or 2 blocks. We're not talking every block. We're talking just even if you just start off with your fallow blocks, that's a good place to start. Moving on to weed control, and once again, this time of the year, it's a good idea to have a look at your spray rig and do some basic maintenance on it, so that when you do come to load up your first tankful, it's ready to go. So the one item that is often neglected are your nozzles. In order to comply with 2,4-D regulations, we have to have specific nozzles on all our spray rigs. It's law, so I urge you to spend the time, if you haven't done so already, assessing your nozzles and making sure you have the right ones fitted to your spray rig. If you need assistance, if you need help, please give us a call. In terms of problem weeds, there are lots of those, but the ever-present ones of swamp panic, and wild sorghum are still very much around in the district. The swamp panic seems really, really bad after the recent flooding events. But what has been proven is that an efficient and timely long-term residual application of any of the well-known herbicides will control this grass, but it has to be done pre-emerge. It would appear that once this grass is up and running and growing, it is very, very hard to control. So your best line of defense is get in early, get the stuff down, and if you do that, you've won half the battle. The other half is the follow-up. So this grass has got such a huge seed production that you get waves of it coming through. So don't think if you put your one application down, that's it. You have to go back, you have to keep checking, and you have to keep checking for those areas where possibly the herbicide hasn't worked, or whether you've had a miss, or whether the second wave is coming through, and react to it. Don't assume one application will clean the whole place up, because it won't. The other thing too is when you put your long-term residuals down, you tend to stop short of the drain banks, and that's where a lot of this grass flourishes and produces more seed to reinfect paddock alongside of the drains. So look at some residual control on your drain banks as well. In terms of wild sorghum, or as it's commonly known, it is another problem, and long-term residual pre-emerge controls do work on it as well. But once again, the follow-up is critical. If you do get those seeds germinating at depth and coming through that residual layer, you have to then use some sort of knockdown. And that's where regular field inspections will tell you whether you've had a break or this stuff's coming through, and you can react accordingly. If you don't do that, the first time you will see it is when it starts waving at you, when it forms a seed head already. And then it's too late. So once again, be vigilant out there, walk your paddocks, and you shouldn't have a problem with those two weeds. That's it for this year's shed meetings. I apologize for my boring voice and you having to put up with it, but thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, please give me a call. Thanks. Cheers.